Welcome back, everyone. We're going to continue our series on attachment styles. Today we'll be visiting the anxious attachment style. And as we had previously discussed in my introduction video, I would highly recommend watching that before watching this. That way you get a better idea of where we're at. The first video that I posted was on an introduction to attachment styles. The last one that I posted last week was on secure attachment styles, and today we're delving into anxious attachment styles. So as we had discussed, insecure attachment styles such as the anxious, avoidant, and disorganized all stem from an underlying root cause of parents either being there or not being there in our childhood. So children with anxious attachment will actually find that their parents were overly emotional, anxious when taking care of them, and did not know how to console a crying child. For example, if you were maybe crying and the mother was a new parent or the father was a new parent and he got so frustrated he didn't understand what to do, so he either got angry or rageful at you, or the opposite was they completely disregarded you and didn't cater to your needs that you needed at that time. I mean, you're a child, you're defenseless, those things. And so that's what that stems from. The other trait that could be prominent with caregivers in particular with that situation is that they were trying to self-fulfill their own needs. So I've found in a few friends of mine, they've told me about how they've been raised by their parents, and some of them had shared that their mother or father, as they were growing up, would self-fulfill their own needs. So basically, if they took care of their child, it wasn't for the child's benefit, it was for themselves. They wanted to feel like they were doing something, or it wasn't really out of love. It wasn't a reciprocal type of love for their child. It was the opposite. And so when we reach adulthood, you can see that this is incredibly problematic as we bring in everything that we have had in our childhood happen to us into our future relationships. Again, we bring it to the workplace. And I mention workplace a lot because there's a majority of us that don't know how to turn the on and off switch. And so no matter what, I can tell myself that the experience that I had, let's say, at a grocery store today, I can't take with me to work. I can't take that attitude, or if somebody cuts me off in traffic. But there's a lot of us that don't know how to hone that skill, whether we admit it or not. And so, including myself, we'll take into the workplace, and it affects our relationships with coworkers, especially. So a journal article that was published by Antonia Bifulco, she's a psychologist and a director for the Centre of Abuse Control in Middlesex, UK. It was entitled Linking Lack of Care in Childhood to Anxiety Disorders in Adulthood. And they did a study, and they found that 160 of the participants that were involved in this study had a history of childhood neglect and abuse. Well, as a result of that, those same subjects carried it on later on into adulthood with certain disorders such as generalized anxiety, depression, social phobias. So agoraphobia, being around people might be a little too stimulating, and it triggers some things, as well as panic attacks. And so as we can see here, the role that a parent plays in a kid's childhood affects directly what they grow up to be later on. They then take on to their kids, and then their kids take it on to their great-grandkids. And so we have to be self-aware of these triggers and these things that can pose a roadblock in a successful family line or raising our kids properly. I'm about to use a list with you guys that is all the traits of somebody who deals with anxious, preoccupied attachment styles. And I just want you to see if you resonate with any of the problems. And remember, this is also about respecting you. So if you do need to go somewhere private, I would do it now. And maybe you also want to add a pen and paper for this video and the next, just so you guys can do some self-reflection. So right now I would pause the video and get a pen and paper so we can do some direct reflection, because the whole point of these videos is to become self-aware. It's to become introspective and to realize who you are as a person, rather than pushing this baggage away or us repressing these memories and not dealing with them. So go ahead and pause it now. So I'm assuming you guys paused the video, you got a pen and paper, and we're ready to go. So what are the markers of someone who carries this attachment style? And there's 10 of them that I'm going to go over. One is that they have a low self-esteem and there's a visible lack of self-confidence and identity within themselves. So a lot of times they feel rejection. They feel like they're not good enough. They feel that sense of abandonment. There's a lot of things that we discuss that are going to become triggers throughout these characteristics in somebody who has that anxious-preoccupied attachment style. Number 2 is that they give more of themselves to others than they do themselves. And this really stems back to a lack of self-love. Now, as we went over, if you had inconsistent caregiving as a child, and you were crying and you wanted your mom to pick you up, and she wasn't there, or she was, sleeping through you crying, or anything of that sort, we are always going to want to give to others what we didn't have growing up. And that's something you might realize as you grow older and older, is that we look for the things that we ourselves don't have, similar to how we project the things that we do have that we're not aware of on others. So number 3 is that they have a high level of empathy. They're hypersensitive, and it acts as a blessing and a curse, because they can be genuinely empathetic people. They're not narcissists, they're not sociopaths, it's not a mask. But because they're so in tune with everybody's emotions, that's what gives them the anxiety, and that's why they're preoccupied and they have fixations and they're worried about the next thing that could go wrong. And so, tying into that, a lot of the partners are clingy. There was a girl that I had dated in the past, and she would blow up my phone all the time while I was at work. I'm not a person that, honestly, I'm a horrible person at getting back to people, and it's not because like, I'm going to wait a while, it's more like I'm actually doing things, because you guys know I have this business, I'm helping out at another business, I'm working on my massage therapy degree right now. I went back to school for that. I'm looking at doing a mentoring program in Florida in July, and so there's a lot of things riding on it. But getting back to that, this girl, she would blow up my phone when I was at work, and then she'd want to see me, and she'd text me like, hey, let's hang out, let's do this, this, and this, and I would tell her I'm at work, yeah, I'm at work till this time, but let's plan on this. And she was like, no, that won't work, or whatever. And so it was like this constant need. I remember, and this was back when I was very naive to men and women's dating and understanding the relationship dynamic and things like that. That same girl, I had a job at a very high-paying office doing contracting work for gas companies to locate parcels of land. So I was a GIS coordinator using a geographic interface software to find leaseholds. And this job required me to get up incredibly early because it was an office job, and it was strenuous because I sat at a desk all day. And I'm a person that likes to be on my feet. I wouldn't say I'm hyper, but I'm pretty all over the place. I have to be moving, especially that's why you'll see me moving with my hands or fidgeting, or because I have to be moving. It's actually when my brain starts to really kick in into overdrive. But this girl in particular, she had a job doing food, and she worked second to third shift. They closed around 11 o'clock. So when she'd get out, she'd expect me to stay up late to talk to her And at that time, I didn't respect my boundaries enough to know I don't need to talk to her at this time. And so I'd stay up late, stay up to 1 a.m. on the phone. We'd be texting on the phone or we'd be calling each other. And it was just like, I didn't realize that I wasn't respecting my own boundaries. Like if she wanted to do something, she had days off and stuff. And this was when I realized like I wasn't acting myself. Like I was almost putting on this front because I was so scared to be myself around people. But I give you guys that as an example because she told me some things about her family, and it turns out that she didn't get a lot of caregiving growing up. So she get very clingy and attached, and she get jealous of little things and overprotective, and a lot of it stems from that. So the next thing is that they are fixated on the relationship rather than the mission. I think a healthy balance between somebody who has a secure relationship and an insecure relationship is that they complement each other and they want to grow together. Like if I have a partner, whoever that is in the future, I want to help them grow. I think of it like a plant or a flower. You're consistently putting water into it, and you're making sure the soil levels are correct, and you're making sure there's no worms or spider mites eating at the plants. But I just share that because you're meant to grow together. And it talks about that too, where I come from growing up spiritually, is that you want somebody who's equally yoked with you. And so you do not want somebody who is unequally yoked. So if you're on this level, you don't want somebody who's down here. You want somebody who's up here, or you want somebody to even be up here, because then you have to pursue God and pursue the finer things in life in order to be at the level of that person. It's important to challenge each other and to grow together and to have that, to share that passion, to endure and press on. But you guys don't want to pull each other away from what you're meant to do and meant to be. And I think that's where things in my mind can get toxic in relationships that I've found. So number 6 is that you self-sabotage your relationships. I used to do this when I had this attachment style, and it was totally subconscious. This has to do stemming back to feelings of self-worth and not feeling like enough. And so I would purposely create scenarios where I'd do things that would create a chain effect that would then later on compromise any sort of progression from a relationship happening. And it was the most dangerous, horrible, vicious cycle I think I've ever been on. And once I became self-aware of it, like now I'm aware of it, I realized, okay, this trigger sets off this trigger sets off this. And that's why I've talked to you guys about self-awareness so freaking much. Number 7 is that they have a constant fear of being rejected or abandoned. Again, this stems from childhood. Maybe you had siblings growing up, and if they moved out early when you were younger, you only remember that instant. You don't remember the other things. You don't remember them coming back and visiting. It's amazing what we keep inside our psyche and our inner child as a result of trauma, and totally forget about the good times that we had because it clouds all sorts of positive events that we recall. Number 8 is there's the hypersensitivity again that I discussed previously. So arguments and certain words can cause a combustion to just go off with people who deal with this anxious-preoccupied attachment style. And so it will already batter their low self-esteem that they already have. If they're already feeling worthless and you say something to them that makes them feel like they're unworthy and you just hammer and hammer and hammer it on, that's really bad for the relationship. And it's going to make that person feel like garbage. And so that's something you need to take into factor when you realize, if you're dating somebody right now, when you realize the attachment style that they are, you need to learn what that is and how to help one another rather than just saying, oh yeah, they got problems, this isn't going to work. Because that's what we see in society, and people who do not make things stick and work. And I'm not talking about like abuse or cheating or divorce, infidelity. We're not talking about that. I'm talking about people that just, when the going gets tough, they just want to pull away and they don't want to put any effort in. So number 9 is the difficulty of trusting your partner. If you have a fear of abandonment, you'll have a fear of being cheated on, most likely. And so they tend to create false scenarios in their head as well, or they get themselves psyched out if like somebody's texting them and then they're like in their mind like, well, I wonder if they're out partying with so-and-so. But if you know the person and you know the things that they do, I'm assuming you won't put yourself in a situation that would cause you anxiety as well. So that's also something to be aware of. If you're not into partying, I highly suggest not dating somebody who's into partying, because your imagination will be running wild. And I think that's just natural as a result of where we are at in society today. Number 10 is people pleasing. So the anxious-preoccupied attachment style, when they're people pleasing, they want to do everything right for somebody else. And this goes back to I give everything that I am to others, but I receive very little in return. And so I want to talk about a solution, because we don't have to live like this any longer. We have the ability to make that decision, and you should say to yourself every day, I choose to live a healthy and happy life that is present, both vibrant and beautiful. I no longer live in my past. I am in my present. And everything I encounter not only teaches me a lesson, but it molds me into the person that I am meant to become. Just because you have had a bad past does not mean that you have to live in it. You are not meant to carry that burden, but to be free. And the beauty of how the brain was created allows us to unlearn bad habits and traumas. So we have to develop a self-awareness of our body and processing emotions and patterns, and really recognize what triggers us. If somebody says a word to me and I feel a heightened sense of like my chest is getting tight, or my breathing is getting cut off, or my heart is beating rapidly, well, there's something there then. That's tension that's stored, that's trauma that's stored in the body that needs to be released, and you need to identify what that is. I want you to glance over your past relationships with your partners and your parents. Glance over the relationship that you've had with past partners, past romantic partners, and your parents. What did that look like? And how did you feel in those moments, in those instances? Solutions that I've done is I've become more mindful. I started journaling, and I don't journal every day just because I don't have the capacity to do that yet, but I journal when I feel like journaling. I do breathing exercises in the morning. I'm trying to get a little better at that. Sometimes I'm inconsistent. Then when you feel like you are fully self-aware and healed, from that point on, you should find somebody who has a secure attachment, because now you will know what that looks like. If you didn't have a parent that had a secure attachment style, that's okay. Or if you didn't, that's okay. But now you know what it looks like. You know what a secure, even a relationship that has a secure attachment style looks like. Then you can find a partner who complements that same style. And I don't say this enough, but I love you all, and I'm proud of your journey thus far. My ambition is not only to educate you all so that you can become the men and women that you've been designed to be, but also that you share what I've learned over the years, and that you share from these videos, but that you also share what you have learned with those who need to hear it. And as always, I thank you. We're going to be doing avoidant attachment style next week. Stay frosty.